Welcome to UpYourStack podcast. I'm your host, Noah Berk. I'm also the co-founder of OBO, an elite HubSpot solution partner. Every week, we feature some of our favorite HubSpot app partners who've either built their applications on HubSpot or have integrated with HubSpot to help you get the most out of your HubSpot tech stack. And today, I'm really excited to have an awesome guest with me, Gilles. He is from an organization called Livestorm. And just for enunciation purposes and the audience, you are French. How do we enunciate your name? I want to make sure we do not mess this up.
First of all, thank you for having me. That's very kind. And as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm French. And the right way to pronounce it, it's a bit tricky, but it's Gilles. Gilles. I think,
Gilles.
yeah, exactly. You're a native. That's it. You know how to do it.
I've been to Paris before. Does that count?
It counts. Now it counts.
So let's get right into kind of what you guys do. Livestorm.
Yeah.
First of all, awesome name.
Thank you.
What do you guys do?
All right. So basically, Livestorm is a webinar platform. We've been around actually with almost one of the dinosaurs. We've been around for 8 years. French company, obviously, and we specialize in events from 10 to a few thousand people. And a typical webinar use case, weekly basis, monthly basis, and for product demos or customer training, that's mostly what we do. We don't do virtual events. We don't do one-off type of event. We don't do meetings. We're like right in the middle. And the typical persona is a marketer. We're going to talk about marketing today, and this is one of our core persona. And as a European platform, we focus a lot on privacy, security, and certain industries that are actually very sensitive to that. But we're going to talk about positioning later on, so I'm not going to spoil the fact.
And is this one of the areas you were solving for? Is this kind of what has helped Livestorm take off, is on the privacy side?
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually one of the few to have like an ISO 27K certification for security, GDPR by design, and we've taken like this positioning around mid-market and enterprise, especially in Europe. 80% of what we do is actually in Europe. So we're actually the largest webinar platform in terms of revenue in Europe. So essentially, we're the number one alternative to any other US platform for European companies. Obviously, a lot of the business is also in North America, but we've taken our positioning on the European ground more specifically now.
And what do you credit to your traction? So you've been doing this for 8 years. What has led you to where you are now? And you obviously alluded to some of it on the data and security side, but I'm sure there's more to it than just that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I guess that comes back to actually the reason why we started all that in the first place. And essentially, Livestorm was a final exam project from school, to be honest, right?
Oh.
Actually, yeah, I met my co-founder in university, and back then I was actually interning in my last year at this startup in Paris. I was running a bunch of webinars, and I was using one of the old guys from the 90s, and I was actually experiencing some of the issues that some of the prospects still have to this day. Basically, I was forcing people to download something on a computer just to attend a webinar, something they were actually primarily interested in. And I was doing a lot of things by hand, like having a manual, coding manually the emails and the landing pages and whatnot, and also connecting APIs with code. And it was like, there must be a better way. It was a very candid thing. I wanted to have I was not a video expert. I was not a video engineer, but I knew how to build UIs and UX. And I wanted to have something that doesn't care so much about the video, but actually cares about the experience around it, like the experience of organizing it, right? And so we wanted to have a landing page builder. We wanted to have everything in a browser. And that was actually very new back then. The WebRTC technology was actually very new. And we wanted to have a very good connector. And that's actually one of the topics today. But we wanted to have a really good connector with the CRM without having to download a CSV, Excel, or whatnot. So we just built that, and immediately it kind of hit. And a year after that, we raised our first seed round. We had a few hundred customers, actually most of them in the US. And it was the playbook was, it's going to be a self-service traction, credit card only, SMB, tech marketer, and willing to have a webinar platform that lives in a browser, that it's easy to use, that has all the logistics installed already without having to do anything by hand. And that was like the very first positioning aspect of it. And it just hit. And then obviously the rest is history, but COVID also happened. And
So you knew from pretty early on, like who your ideal customer was.
yeah,
One, it was
because
the same customers you were trying to manage and solve for yourself.
I was solving my own problem essentially, right? And so obviously we had this very educated hypothesis, and then when we first started like building the landing page, the very first landing page, we had this almost like HubSpot has this like a smart form, right? We have like a smart form that kind of enriches all the different leads that we were getting on the waiting list landing page back then, and 90% of them, they were like exact same profile, like 5 to 50 people SMB in tech, and that was it. We knew we hit a spot.
And did you notice, especially I can imagine applications and software such as yours probably took off during COVID, when all of a sudden, what happened to the organization? What happened to the company during that period of time?
Oh man, everything went through the fan, like very big time. I mean, it was actually, I remember this day. It was on Monday, the very first day of the week. It was like mid-March-ish something, and right before the first lockdown in Paris, and we were getting like a weird spike on the infrastructure. And I was going to my dashboard for some sort of reporting on the MR side, and I was thinking, man, we're getting a lot of customers today. And I was like refreshing the dashboard, and numbers were actually going up every time I was refreshing the dashboard, like the revenue dashboard. I was like, wow, what is happening? And actually, the first week we had the major downtime that we ever had in 8 years, because out of a sudden, a platform that was built for, I don't know, X type of concurrent webinar or attendees or whatever, and out of a sudden we had like 25x to absorb. And
Wow.
same thing happened and that overnight, and same thing happened for the customer support. They were used to having like about 2,000 conversations a month. There was just like 3 or 4 of them, and out of a sudden they had like 20,000 conversations a month. So we had to absorb that as well. So everything went through the fan. It was like a very intense experience, but I think one of the good things is we were about 10-ish at a time. Yeah. And I think somehow it was very painful because it was a lot of stress, but it also brought us together. And it's not like a random BS I just say during PR, but it was actually true. You know, that's one of the things that I realized. Everyone said, you know what, we're going to solve this. We're going to go through that. It's just temporary state. It's going to last like 3-4 months, whatever. But if you need support, we're going to do support. I did support. I stayed on intercom doing whatever support we needed to do. Also, we just raised a Series A like a few months before, fortunately. Wow. So we just like paid AWS whatever they needed to keep everything running. We just paid the man, pay to win. And we went through the quarter like this. And after that, when things settled, we went from, I think the numbers were, we had about like 1,500 customer-ish, about that. And when we got out of 1,000 customers. And when we got out of the first 3 months, we had about 3,000 customers. And wow. By the end of the year, we went from, I can't tell some numbers now, we went from 1 million to 8 million ARR in 1 year. That was just insane. Yeah.
That's a hockey stick curve right there.
It was like, exactly. That's always what I say. You say like, you never live that twice. We knew it was like something, even in the startup world, it was like something very special, and we probably never going to go through that again. So it was a very special year, definitely.
I would say at the time, you guys were also very mission critical. A lot of organizations, they had to move all of this online. No more in-person events. They were trying to coordinate with teams. And apps such as yours were critical to keeping essentially the economy going.
Absolutely. And that's actually for a long time, I was like, yeah, you know what, we're a webinar platform. We're not like saving puppies or whatever. But I realized then that a lot of people were actually counting on us on some level. That was really cool. We work with the NHS, coordinating NHS is the UK public system, healthcare public system, and we help them coordinating hospitals and clinics and whatnot. And it was very cool. Also, you had like some very intense conversations over the phone because, as I said, we had a major downtime because we were not anticipating that much load. And I had people actually calling me on the phone, actually. And I remember this lady, she was actually crying because she needed to do her job. She was working in healthcare and nothing was working. So it was like very intense on so many levels. But looking back, I'm glad that we went through that.
Yeah, and obviously, I'm sure that helped you with traction. Obviously, word of mouth is a great way to continue growing and building the organization. So obviously, there's a lot of solutions out there in the marketplace right now. You can pick from a lot, and in your particular case, people don't have to download any software to be able to use your webinar application. But I'm sure there's other competitors coming out now that same thing. How are you
Yes.
guys staying ahead of the competitors? How are you continue to position yourself where a B2B organization or maybe even a
Yeah.
B2C organization is like, hey, I need Livestorm as my
Yeah.
platform of choice?
Absolutely. That's a very good point. So there are a lot of things. First of all, when you use a software like this, when things go down, when you have an
Yeah,
issue, and another when the software has an issue, it's a very stressful experience because you're live. We're not right now. We're recording this podcast, so if there is
yeah,
a mistake, we could always go back, cut it, and do
correct.
whatever. Live, you don't have that. You have no excuse. If it goes down, it goes down, and that's it. So I guess one of the things we need to be perfect or better than the others is reliability. We have to be
Yes.
better at this. And the fact is building video is it's actually very easy. We made the bet a few years ago when we started that we were not actually going to build our own video technology. We were going to rely on the third party, just like AWS, to cover some of that ground. But what we knew for sure is that there are so many corner cases you need to cover even though you don't fully own your own technology because you have so many conditions, so many different types of configuration when someone hosts a webinar. Maybe they have
Mhm.
this type of computer, this type of browser, this type of connection. Maybe they have a firewall. Maybe they have, I don't know, a bunch of stuff, and you need to be able to
Sure.
cover all those corner cases. So reliability is 8 years of building an insane amount of code and logics to cover all those corner cases. So that's one thing. The second thing is we talked about security and privacy. That has been one of the core focus for the past 2 or 3 years, making sure we're the best at it in this area. So that's one way we can differentiate ourselves. And also one way to differentiate ourselves, especially from the bigger players, so the WebEx of this world or the Teams
Hmm.
even, is to say those guys are horizontal platform. And there's like a very big platform. They do meetings, they also do emails now and Slack and Notion type of, they do a lot of things regarding collaboration. They're mostly turned towards internal collaboration. So for us, the logical counterpoint was to say, okay, you're doing internal collaboration. We're going to do external training, external selling, and we're going to host webinars only. So at the end of the day, what it means is if, for example, if I take the example of Teams, they're going to talk to everyone. We're going to talk to mid-market and enterprise. They do internal meetings. We're going to do external webinars. They do internal
Interesting.
collaboration, external communication for us. They're a bit in the US, we're a bit in Europe. They work best with Microsoft Dynamics. We're going to work best with every other integrations from SMB to enterprise. So Salesforce, HubSpot, Marketo, Product, everyone. Be agnostic in terms of data enablement, essentially. So this
Interesting.
is, we take
So some really
counterpoints.
good, yeah. So really good advice there. I think for a lot of people is like if there is a large incumbent in the industry, taking a look at their market position, saying what are they not filling, what gap are they not filling
Yeah.
in that particular market, what are they not going after, and to be able to say, hey, listen, here's a better niche for us
Yeah.
that we can do ourselves. That
And,
that's
and that's
that's
the thing.
incredibly bright.
Exactly. And that's the thing. You don't want to replace Teams. You don't want to replace Zoom. You don't want to replace WebEx. The conversation that we have with the customers is not to replace them, it's to say there is actually a way to get more ROI, even though it is another line of budget in your stack. It is actually to bring you much more money than if you were actually going to do it with Teams. So the goal is not to replace, is to complete and to complete in such a big way that it's going to compensate for this additional investment. So you instead of competing with a broader platform, you become a very much opinionated product, expert product at one thing, and trying to very widen the gap between the value that you get and the price that they pay, and that's going to do it.
So being complementary to the existing technology stack, and I guess that kind of leads me to my next question. You mentioned you have integrations with HubSpot, and
Yeah,
you mentioned that was a kind of a big thing, especially earlier in the conversation, where you didn't want to have to upload lists directly into the webinar platform, because that was it was a painful experience. Why HubSpot? Why integrate with HubSpot? What gaps are you filling in the ecosystem? How does it work with HubSpot?
Yeah. So HubSpot, I think, was one of the first integration that we did. It was actually one of the worst that we had.
Okay.
Initially, Livestorm was built towards SMB. We talked about marketer, we talked about SMB and mid-market in a way. And that was like the persona ICP up until 2021, 2022. Okay. So it means that for 5 years of the life of Livestorm, we were really focusing towards that specific persona target in sense. So it was logical for us to go to HubSpot and build an integration, because that's the number one product those people are going to use. We're a marketing product. We know how to do inbound. Webinar is part of the inbound loop of any sort of company. So it made a lot of sense to be in that funnel somehow with HubSpot. Right. But it was, like, as I said, like one of the worst integration we ever built. I think we kind of rushed it, and maybe that's something we can talk about later on the advice. But we recently, well, a couple of years ago in 2022, 2021, we actually decided we wanted to redo it, and in order to better serve those self-service and SMB segment. And today it is certified. It has about 2,500 installs something. It is actually the number one integration for webinars in Europe. And that's really cool. That's really cool. But it took a lot of time. It makes a lot of sense for that customer segment.
Let's continue on this topic. What was the impact of the integration, or at least the fact it wasn't working the way that you wanted it to? Maybe kept breaking. I mean, I guess tell me more about this story here and some of the lessons learned.
It was not breaking per se. It was just like I think we didn't identify correctly the kind of the product market fit of the integration. We went with a very kind of engineering mindset. We had this very good Pipedrive integration, right? Pipedrive was actually the first integration we built, because Pipedrive was a very old customer. It is a very old customer of ours, and they wanted to have the integration, so we built it, and we tried to actually copy kind of the model of that CRM into HubSpot. But turns out it was really not how people wanted it to be. They wanted to have more granularity on the mapping, on the objects they were going to manipulate, on the triggers even. They wanted also to have something that works both ways, which was really not the case they wanted to have something that could actually leverage the HubSpot landing pages. So basically we built everything wrong, because we tried to apply the pattern to something that was actually very different. Even though both of platforms are kind of CRM, HubSpot is actually much more complete, because it has a lot of marketing automation features. So as a result, they need more features. So first mistake here, and something we solved later on.
Yeah, I can imagine that Pipedrive is more of a CRM per se, whereas HubSpot originally came from the marketing angle. So obviously you're selling probably to a lot of marketers versus a CRM side. Those are different needs ultimately in the end. I can see where that would have happened. Yes, of course, anyone listening to this, check out the Livestorm app in the HubSpot app ecosystem store. You can see all the different types of integrations, data you can move. There's a couple where I believe are bidirectional in there as well.
Yes.
It's powerful, because as marketers, you need this information to be able to do your job successfully. You need to be able to know who's coming to the webinar, having all the analytics, having the data flow back one way or the other.
I think one of the triggers is that we started using HubSpot ourselves. That's something that happened later on. I think about, like, actually one of the former head of marketing at Livestorm was a former HubSpot. So when she joined, we started using HubSpot, obviously. And that's also when we realized, shit, they're right. We're not doing this right. We're not doing this right. There's missing something. So the contacts became bidirectional. Attendees became contacts. You could map deals, companies. You even have some events when someone watches a replay or watches an on-demand webinar. So we added a bunch of features, and now it is actually very complete, one of the most complete.
So there's a trend here in your career. You solve things for yourself first is the key. So if there's a problem out there, you got to hunt for it. Then you solve it for yourself, and it solves it for everyone else. That is an excellent way of approaching business.
Exactly. We were drinking our own champagne for the past 8 years. And actually, it's very fun, because even since we use Livestorm on a daily basis, and even actually the way we use Livestorm is even probably one of the hackiest way you can actually use Livestorm. So we're actually very aware of the gaps of the product. For example, we're going to talk about AI probably at some point. There
That's
is
the
actually
next
a ton.
convert. Yeah.
Absolutely. There is tons of features AI-wise that don't exist yet in a product, but exist internally because we built it ourselves for ourselves, thinking, shit, this is missing. Let's build it for ourselves, and then we're going to incorporate it in the product.
Let's talk a little bit about AI. What's your future roadmap look like, and how is AI going to fit into it?
Yeah, so that's a good point. And I think, so we thought about, obviously there is like a lot of things you can do with AI. And I think the main reason for that is because first of all, we need to think about what's the medium that is Livestorm. The medium is video essentially, and video by itself encompasses a lot of semantics. And can be transformed into many things. It can be transformed in text, it can be transformed in audio, also in videos or multiple types of videos. So there's a lot of things you can do here in terms of AI. But essentially, the way I see it, there is a pyramid of the stuff you should do with AI first. So the first one is, it's basically a pyramid of problems. The first one is, if you have a Livestorm workspace, you're likely to host many different types of events. It's going to be product demos, trainings, even some internal stuff. It's going to be happening on the same workspace, just like Slack. So basically, you're going to produce a lot of content, a lot of semantics. So you need to find your information. And so that's the first thing. You need to make sense of things. So this means the first brick you need to build is transcript. And then you have to build maybe a summary. And then you have to have maybe live captioning, or not live captioning, but captioning itself on the videos. And that's like the very basic fundamentals of AI. We build that just to solve the problem of accessing the information or indexing the information. The second layer is, how do we enrich the experience of it, or of the live thing? So I was talking about live captioning. That's one way to do it, live captioning. But if you go beyond that, there is dubbing. You could actually, instead of paying for having an interpret doing that, there is APIs today to do some live dubbing. Live dubbing is just speech to text on top of a live transcription. And there is actually now APIs to do just that. And I think the last final brick of that is, the final top of the pyramid is, actually there is two, is expanding the content. So we talked about how video is a rich media. So how do you transform video into many different types of contents, LinkedIn posts, blog posts, whatever. And basically you turn your webinar into some sort of content generation machine, essentially. So that's like one very cool way to use it. And maybe some very enterprisey thing is like topic detection, and make sure things that have been said or shared is either redacted if it's sensitive, or maybe you could detect personal information, that sort of thing, and trying to do something about it. It's a very enterprise type of use case. It is actually demanded.
That's awesome. Maybe I'm just going really futuristic sci-fi here, but also avatars. So you don't even have to show up to your own webinar you produce. You just
Absolutely.
Plug it all in, type it all out. Here I am, everyone. This is my avatar up there. I mean, life would be great.
Speaking of hacky things, that's actually one. We have this session we do internally, and we call it Tune and Learn. And essentially, it's this internal session where a team presents something they do. And one of the team, they had this thing where, they were actually like understaffed because people were on vacations, or I don't remember quite how it was. But essentially, they use Synthesia, which is an app that basically creates avatar, right? And they have an AI build the text, or maybe correct or generate part of the text. They give that text to Synthesia. The avatar starts talking the text, and actually, there is an actual person speaking the text, telling the text to the audience. They produced this video, and they just played the video in an automated fashion inside Livestorm using our automations features. And there you have it. You don't need to host something. You just plug tools with each other, and you have your automated webinar with fake human. That works.
Well, the key is when you start taking pictures of you and I, and we're up there, and it's not really us doing any talking. It's kind of like what actors and actresses are all worried about right now. You steal their body. I think I was reading an article about Nicolas Cage and how he was saying, "Man, I'm about to be replaced by myself." That's the next one. We kid and joke, but where this is headed in the next 3 to 5 years, it's just, hey, put our avatar out there.
I don't know if you tried already, the voice cloning, and there is this also, I forgot the name of the company, but you actually do also avatar cloning, so you can actually combine the two of them. It's a it's creepy. The first time I heard about the voice cloning, I was on Slack and my co-founder made that joke of, hey, so Gilles has this message to send to you guys. It was on general, hundreds of people actually like listening to this message. It was a very nice message, obviously not a
Yeah.
troll, but it was me speaking. I was like, did I say that? Did I just like spaced out? No, it was like, and it was like very my way of speaking, It was just not as much hesitating, but still, it was like very creepy.
Well, this future we're headed into is pretty exciting. I have to say that.
It is.
So, what suggestions do you have for people who are building apps on HubSpot or integrating with HubSpot? And you talked about one of your experiences, but what would you
Yeah.
share?
Honestly, I think one of the cool things I like about HubSpot is it is a very complete product. It has this thing where you can actually find tiny golden nuggets here and there in a product, but also in the API. Some of the portion of the APIs they're not even announced sometimes and they're still there, and that's very cool. So they have this, for example, the calling API, so you can actually record calls and push calls to the to replace Gong, for example, and have that in HubSpot. I didn't know that existed, so it's very cool. Anyway, so I think that's my first advice. Explore the product. It doesn't matter if you're going to use it or not. Just like hack your way through the developer API portal and try to see what's in there. Try the endpoints. Try to think, imagine what can be built around it. You might find some really cool features to actually build on top of. And so explore the product. That's the first thing. Second thing is try to understand what is the actual need and don't try to reapply a pattern or something that you think is the right pattern, just like we did. I think HubSpot is a very large platform, as I said, and as such, people using it, they have like very precise needs, and I think those needs will evolve from a company to another. I'm pretty sure that company A is going to use custom objects very differently that from company B. So you need to take into account the flexibility that requires when you build a HubSpot integration.
Well, Gilles, thank you so much for, again, joining us on this show. And of course, any listener out there, if you're interested in learning more about how to level up your own HubSpot, feel free to reach out to us at the obogroup.com. And you can also reach out to me via LinkedIn as well, Noah Berk. Again, thank you so much for joining and hope you enjoyed listening.